Hey guys, Mark Walters with Mark's Comic Hall, y'all, and I'm bringing you a little bit of something different from what I normally do. I had a friend of mine that asked me a while back about this because he was aware of the comics, and he said, "Why don't you make a video about that? That would be really funny." And I keep meaning to do it, and I keep forgetting. And I just recently kind of came back across these books, and I thought, all right, I'll make this. It'll be a fun little filler video. If you guys are new to this channel and you enjoy this content, please do me a favor and like and subscribe. I would very much appreciate it. I am trying to build up my subscriber base and hopefully get this channel to a point where I can monetize it a little bit. So I'm going to give you a little bit of backstory on me. And for those of you that watch the channel, you may not even know this either. And I promise I'll keep this as short as I can because I want to get to the books, and that's why you're here. But it's important you know a little bit of this. So my background as far as collecting comics is I didn't start collecting comics until the summer of 1990. I was actually taking a summer course in school. When I was a kid, I was much more into like Mad and Cracked magazine. That was my jam, was Mad and Cracked magazine. So I fell in love with a lot of what I didn't know until later were classic comic book artists, but I found them by way of Mad and Cracked magazine. In the summer of 1990, I went into my very first comic book store, which at the time was Lone Star Comics. Lone Star Comics eventually would become mycomicshop.com because it was owned by a guy named Buddy Saunders. And all the Lone Star Comics stores, which was like one of the only chains of comic stores at the time, they're now all shut down, so they're gone. But that was kind of my initiation into comic book shops. And I remember walking into Lone Star Comics, and I bought several comic books that day because it was all kind of new to me. But the first Marvel comic book that caught my eye, I will never forget. It was The Punisher. And I saw it and I was like, The Punisher? I was like, everything about it, like the skull on the chest, the character name, everything about it. I was like, this looks awesome. I want to say it was Punisher number 29 of the regular series. I just know it's got Frank as the Punisher real big on the cover. I'd have to go back and look, but I think that was the issue. But it looked awesome, you know. And then I bought that and several, but that was like the first Marvel comic book that I actually picked up off the shelf. I'm like, I'm gonna buy this. I think they were like $1 back then, and I bought that and like several other books. I think Amazing Spidey 328 was in that stack. You know, there was like a Jim Lee X-Men. I can't remember. There was a lot of stuff, a lot of cool stuff. And so the Punisher has always had a very special place in my heart. He's like one of my favorite Marvel characters. I just love that. I love everything about that character. And just so you know, even though I hadn't been collecting comics, I really made up for lost time because within my first month of collecting comic books, I had amassed over 20 long boxes of comics. So I was really taking it seriously. I started setting up as a vendor at shows. I got initiated into the convention world and everything. Years later, I became very good friends with Tim Bradstreet, who is considered now a quintessential cover artist for The Punisher. Tim, I don't even know how many covers he did. I want to say it well over 100. But he did a ton of Punisher covers for Marvel. And also became friends with Thomas Jane. And I remember there was a convention we had here in town. Thomas Jane, of course, played The Punisher, if you guys don't know. But there was a convention I had here in town, and I had Tim and I had Tom Jane, and they were guests at the show. And at that show, when it was over, we went to, Tim and I, our buddy Scott Harbin, had a photo studio here in Dallas. And Tim does a lot of work from photo reference, because if you look at his covers, they're very photorealistic, kind of film noir looking, and so he shoots a lot of photo reference to help kind of put his covers together. So we went to Scott's studio because we were going to shoot some photo reference for some of his covers, and Tim was like, hey, I want you to, be in. Maybe I'll throw you in some of these photos and whatnot. And I didn't really think much about it. I was just kind of there to help him out, And so while we were there, we were just about to wrap up, and I said to Tim, I said, hey, it's a building in downtown Dallas. I said, hey, Tim, Scott has a really cool fire escape out that door. We should go out there and shoot some stuff. And Tim was like, yeah, that'd be cool. So we go out on the fire escape, and we start staging these different photos. And one of the photos we did, it has me in the foreground, and I'm holding a real AK-47 because Scott Harbin, for some reason, has all these real guns that he probably shouldn't have. And so Scott was dressed up. Tim normally had a model named Tom O'Brien that would dress up as the Punisher, but he wasn't with us, I don't think, at this particular stage. So Scott dressed up as the Punisher. He's standing behind me, like up the stairs on the fire escape. I'm standing in the foreground. I'm holding a real AK-47. Scott's holding a couple of Uzis, like real Uzis. And we're like 3 or 4 stories up on the fire escape. Looking down as Tim is shooting the photos, we're looking over Tim, and there's the Dallas police station, and it was the shift change, and all these cops, like dozens of cops, are coming out of the police station, and I'm thinking, oh crap, they're about to just start shooting. They're not even going to ask questions. They're just going to start shooting at us. They look up, they see us, you see them kind of talking amongst themselves, and then they just keep walking. I turn and I say to Scott, I'm like, what? How are these guys not freaking out right now? He goes, oh, they all know me. I do a lot of stuff for them. They all know me. They know I photograph a lot of stuff. And I'm like, what kind of stuff are you photographing that this is no big deal? So anyway, we shoot those photos. Months go by later, and I don't really think anything about it. And okay, now we're 6 minutes in. I got to show some books because I know this is, I told you guys I'd try to keep it short. Months go by, I don't hear anything about it. Tim finally calls me up. He says, hey, check your email. And I'm like, oh yeah? And he goes, yeah, check your email. So I open up the email and I see this piece of me that Tim has illustrated. And I'm like, wow, that's awesome. And he goes, that's going to be the cover to Punisher number 15. And I'm like, what? Like, I'm totally flabbergasted. And sure enough, in 2005... this comes out. This hits the shelf. Look at this. That's me on the cover of a Punisher comic book. And I'm like front and center. Like, I'm like bigger on this cover than the Punisher is. So yeah, that's me holding an AK-47 on the cover of the Punisher number 15. That's Scott Harbin dressed as the Punisher behind me. You know what? I'm going to take this out because I want you guys to see it. I don't want the light to reflect out of it because I don't want it to interrupt with the artwork. So, okay. There I am on the cover of the Punisher. I had a buddy of mine ask me, he said, is your character name Mother Russia? And I was like, oh man, I wish. That's like such a cool, that would be such a cool character name for like a mobster character, Mother Russia. Sadly, no, that's just the name of the story. And honestly, like this, I do not appear in the actual comic. I'm just a character on the cover. But I mean, look at this. This is like the Mark Walters Punisher cover. I mean, it's crazy. When I saw this in color with the masthead and everything, my jaw hit the floor. I couldn't believe it. I bought like 80 copies of this so I could give it out to like friends and family. And then I ended up having some, every time I would have a convention, I would have some of these sitting out. I had a sales table, and I'd have some of these sitting out on the sales table. And at every convention, I'd sell like 1 or 2 copies, and people would come up and ask me to sign it. And I'm like, you don't want me to sign this. If anything, I'm going to bring the value down on this book if I sign it. And now, from what I understand, this is actually kind of a hard issue to find. Like, it's not an easy issue to come across, because I don't think that the book had... I mean, it had a decent print run at the time, but I don't think it had a terribly high print run. But yeah, the Punisher number 15 from Marvel Max is pretty cool. And just when you think that my Marvel legacy ends there, this little baby comes along. And here's the thing. This book, actually, if I recall correctly, because it's been a while, I don't think I knew ahead of time that this was coming. Like the Bradstreet book. Okay, so I pulled this just so you guys could see the first issue. This is a title called Dead of Night. It's a Marvel Max comic that came out, I want to say 2008, if I remember correctly. And this was kind of like a horror anthology. It's obviously done to look kind of like the old EC comics. And they would have different artists working on it and different stories. But Man-Thing was kind of like the overarching, concept behind it. So this is issue number 2 of Dead of Night. And my friend Brian Denham was working on this book at the time. He was the artist on this book. And I don't think he told me ahead of time. I think it was kind of a surprise, but I think he might have told me to at least take a look at it. And so I opened the book, and the story, artwork's really cool in here. The story, see, there's Man-Thing. The story has to do with this single mom who is also a stripper, and she goes to the strip club. She's taking care of her son, and then she goes to the strip club. I'm gonna have to cover up this one part because there's some boobies here, but she goes to the strip club, and there is the strip club announcer. That's me. That's Mark Walters and Dead of Night #2 as the strip club announcer. And what am I saying here? Let's see. And oh god, I can't read this. And your amusement and enlightenment from her secret coven in the hot, moist swamp, that mistress of the magic and mayhem, that diva of demons and deviltry. I misread that. It said from her secret coven in the hot, moist swamp. Did I read that correctly? I don't know. I can barely see this. Your wettest dream, your darkest nightmare, witch woman. And I'm introducing her on stage. So that's me at a Marvel comic, Dead of Night. So, so there you go. So 2 different Marvel Max comic books. Punisher #15. Let me hold this up a little better. Punisher #15 there, and Dead of Night #2. And yeah, I just don't know what to say. It's so awesome, and these guys are so cool for doing this. And like I said, when we shot those photos with Tim, I didn't know that they would actually end up in the comic. That was a total surprise, much less be a cover. Just crazy. As you can tell, I was a little younger and thinner back then. But what's funny about this is that I really am holding the gun in the photo. I really had the sunglasses on. The shirt was open. I think the chains were added later by Tim, and the hammer and sickles on the shirt were added. Man, I wish I had that shirt. That is awesome. Anyway, so yeah, the Punisher #15 Marvel Max and Dead of Night #2. If you can find those books, that's me immortalized in 2 different Marvel comic books. The Mark Walters Marvel Legacy. So I had a really fun chat years later with Stan Lee about that, because I worked with Stan several times at different conventions, and he he said something like, great, you're a superhero, and I'm like, no, not really, because in both comics I'm not really playing good guys. But yeah, I just thought that was kind of a fun little thing I wanted to share with you guys, so I hope you enjoyed that. If you can find these books, let me know. Like I said, they're not really the easiest to find right now, especially that Punisher comic. So that's it. If you guys enjoyed this content, please do me a favor, like and subscribe. I would appreciate it. I'll be back with another haul video pretty soon. My name is Mark Walters. You can find out more about me at bigfanboy.com, dallascomicshow.com, or my new film podcast, bigfilmshow.com. Check it out. I'll see you on the next Mark's Comic Call, y'all. Take care, everybody. Bye.